Daniel, what trap are you talking about?
Claire? How long have you been standing there?
Long enough to realize my best friend never married me for love.
3 nights before our 5th wedding anniversary, I heard my husband laughing behind a locked door. Then he said 7 words that destroyed every memory I had of us. She walked right into my trap. He was talking about me. Teased to her eye. Hello, my name is Blair Dennett. I am 36 years old, and until last spring, I believed I had married the safest man in the world. His name was Daniel Reed. He had been my best friend long before he became my husband. We met during our first year of college in Boston, when I spilled coffee across his economics notes. Instead of getting angry, he looked at the brown stain spreading over the pages and said, "Well, now they finally look interesting." That was Daniel. Calm, funny, patient. He remembered birthdays, noticed when I was quiet, and always seemed to know what I needed before I asked. When my mother died during our final year of college, Daniel sat beside me through the entire funeral. He did not fill the silence with empty promises. He simply held my hand. After that day, I trusted him more than anyone alive. For 8 years, we remained close friends. We dated other people. We changed jobs. We moved to different cities and somehow kept finding our way back to each other. Then, one rainy evening, Daniel told me he was tired of watching me choose men who never saw my value. "What if the right person has been standing beside you all along?" he asked. 1 year later, we were married. People called our relationship a fairy tale. I called it home. We lived in a restored townhouse outside Boston. I ran a small but successful interior design company called Bennett House. Daniel worked as a financial consultant. He handled numbers, I handled color, space, and people. Our lives fit together so naturally that I never questioned which pieces belonged to whom. That was my first mistake. The week before our 5th anniversary, Daniel became unusually secretive. He kept turning his phone face down. He left the room to answer calls. When I asked what was happening, he smiled and said he was planning a surprise. I believed him because our anniversary was approaching, and because believing Daniel had become a habit. 3 nights before the anniversary, I came home early from a client meeting. The house looked empty, but I heard voices from Daniel's office in the basement. The office door was closed. Daniel rarely locked it, yet that night the handle would not turn. I was about to call his name when I heard another man laugh. I recognized the voice as Daniel's business partner, Marcus Vale. Then Marcus asked, "You're sure she signed everything?" Daniel answered, "Every page. She never even read the attachments." My body went still. Marcus laughed again. "I told you marrying her was the smart move." There was a pause. Then Daniel said, with a satisfaction I had never heard in his voice, "She walked right into my trap." I stopped breathing. For one foolish second, I tried to convince myself they were discussing a client. Then Marcus said my name. "And Claire still thinks the anniversary trip is real?" "Of course," Daniel replied. "By the time she understands what happened, Bennett House will belong to us, the property will be collateral, and the money will already be gone." The basement seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My company, my home, my money. Daniel had not planned an anniversary surprise. He had planned my destruction. I wanted to throw open the door and demand an explanation. I wanted to scream until the walls shook. But then I remembered something my mother once told me. When someone believes you are weak, do not interrupt them. Let them show you how far they are willing to go. So I quietly walked upstairs. I placed my handbag exactly where I normally left it. I went back outside, opened the front door loudly, and called, "Daniel, I'm home." A moment later, he came upstairs smiling. There was not one trace of guilt on his face. He kissed my cheek and asked about my meeting. I told him it went well. Then he served me wine and talked about our anniversary trip to Napa Valley. He described the vineyard, the hotel, and the private dinner he had supposedly arranged. I smiled at the correct moments while one thought repeated in my mind. "Who are you?" That night, I waited until Daniel fell asleep. Then I took his phone from the nightstand. The passcode had always been the date we first met. It no longer worked. That small change frightened me more than the locked office. At 2 in the morning, I went into the guest bathroom and called the only person I trusted completely, my mother's older sister, Evelyn. Aunt Evelyn had spent 30 years as a corporate attorney in New York. She had retired, but her mind was still sharper than any knife. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Do not confront him. Do not sign anything else. Do not let him know you heard them. Tomorrow morning, bring me every business and financial document you can access." "Do you think I can stop him?" I whispered. "Claire," she said, "the better question is whether he can survive what we find." The next morning, I told Daniel I was meeting a new client. Instead, I drove to Aunt Evelyn's house with my laptop, tax records, business contracts, and copies of every document Daniel had asked me to sign during the past year. I remembered his explanations. One form was supposedly for lower insurance rates. Another was part of a tax strategy. A third was needed to restructure the company before expansion. I had signed them because Daniel was my husband and a financial consultant. Aunt Evelyn read in silence for nearly an hour. Then she removed her glasses. "He has been transferring control of your company," she said. My stomach turned. Buried inside the documents were amendments that gave a holding company the right to seize Bennett House if I failed to repay a new business loan. The holding company was called Northstar Capital. "Who owns Northstar?" I asked. "On paper, several shell companies. But I suspect Daniel and Marcus are behind them." The loan was for $1.8 million. I had never received that money. According to the documents, however, the funds had been deposited into a business account bearing my company's name. Aunt Evelyn searched the account number and found that it was held at a bank I had never used. Someone had created a second Bennett House account. Someone had forged my authorization. The trap was bigger than I had imagined. Aunt Evelyn contacted a forensic accountant named Priya Shah. By noon, the three of us were sitting around Evelyn's dining table, mapping Daniel's plan. Priya found a trail of transfers leading from the false business account to Northstar Capital, then through two more companies, and finally into an investment fund controlled by Marcus. Daniel and Marcus had borrowed money in my company's name, moved it through their own businesses, and arranged for my company and home to be seized when the loan came due. But one detail did not make sense. "Why wait until your anniversary?" Priya asked. "I thought about the trip. Daniel wants me out of town." We checked the loan agreement. The final payment deadline was the morning after our anniversary. If payment was missed, Northstar could immediately begin taking control of my company assets. Daniel planned to have me drinking wine in California while he stole everything I had built. Then Priya found something even worse. My father had left me a trust worth nearly $3 million. I had never touched it. It was protected in my name alone, but 6 months earlier, someone had attempted to change the trust's beneficiary. The new beneficiary was Daniel. The request had been rejected because my signature did not match the original records. My hands began to shake. Stealing my company was terrible. Trying to take my inheritance meant the plan had started long before our anniversary. "How long has he been doing this?" I asked. Aunt Evelyn looked at me carefully. "We need to consider that this may have started before the marriage." That sentence opened a door in my mind that I did not want to enter. I began reviewing old memories. Daniel encouraging me to start Bennett House. Daniel introducing me to the bank that funded my first studio. Daniel volunteering to manage my finances. Daniel proposing only weeks after my father's trust was finalized. Events I had once called romantic now looked calculated. That evening, I returned home and found candles on the dining table. Daniel had cooked my favorite pasta. He placed a small velvet box beside my plate. Inside was a silver necklace, shaped like a compass. "Because you'll always find your way home to me," he said. I nearly laughed at the cruelty of it. Instead, I touched the necklace and said, "It's beautiful." Daniel poured more wine. Then he slid a folder across the table. "Just one boring thing before our trip," he said. "The hotel requires a card authorization, and the bank bundled it with our travel insurance paperwork. Sign on the marked lines." There were 4 yellow tabs. My heart pounded, but I kept my face relaxed. "I'll do it after dinner." For the first time, his smile tightened. "It needs to be submitted tonight." "Then let me read it first." Daniel stared at me for half a second too long. Then he laughed. "Since when do you enjoy legal paperwork?" "Since you made me a business owner." He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "Claire, you trust me, don't you?" There it was. Not affection. A test. I forced a smile. "More than anyone," I signed, but not with my normal signature. I changed 2 letters slightly, exactly as Aunt Evelyn had instructed. It would be enough to challenge the document later. When Daniel took the folder, relief flashed across his face. That night, I photographed every page before he locked it away. The document was not travel insurance. It granted Daniel power of attorney over all my business accounts during any period when I was unavailable due to travel, illness, or incapacity. He was preparing to act in my name while I was in California. The following day, Priya traced the money to a private account in the Cayman Islands. We now had evidence of fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Aunt Evelyn contacted federal investigators through a former colleague. They agreed to review the case, but they needed Daniel and Marcus to reveal their intent clearly. Documents could be explained away. A recorded conversation would be much stronger. So we gave them an opportunity to talk. I told Daniel that one of my largest clients had paid early and that Bennett House now had nearly 600,000 in available cash. His reaction was almost invisible. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then softened. "That's amazing," he said. "You've worked so hard." Within an hour, he went into the basement and called Marcus. What Daniel did not know was that investigators had obtained legal authorization to monitor the office. The conversation was recorded. Marcus wanted the new money moved before our flight. Daniel told him not to rush. She suspects nothing, he said. Claire has trusted me since she was 20. That is the beauty of marrying your best friend. She never asks where the knife is because she cannot imagine you holding it. When the investigator played that recording for me, I did not cry. Something inside me became quiet and cold. I had spent days wondering whether any part of our relationship had been real. Now I understood that the answer did not matter. Whatever Daniel might once have felt, he had chosen to turn my trust into a weapon. I decided it was time to take the weapon away. Our anniversary arrived on a Saturday. Daniel believed we were flying to California that afternoon. That morning, he dressed in the navy suit I had bought him for his birthday and suggested we stop at Bennett House before going to the airport. He said he had prepared a private anniversary surprise at my studio. In reality, he and Marcus had scheduled an emergency board meeting. The false documents gave them enough voting control to remove me as president the moment the loan defaulted. Daniel thought I would walk into my own company, sign one final paper, and leave for the airport without understanding what had happened. I wore a red dress and the compass necklace he had given me. When we arrived, the main design studio was dark. Daniel guided me toward the conference room. "Close your eyes," he said. I did. He opened the door and led me inside. When I opened my eyes, Marcus was seated at the table beside two lawyers I did not recognize. A bottle of champagne waited in an ice bucket. Daniel gave me an apologetic smile. "I know this looks like business, but it will only take a minute." Marcus pushed a document toward me. A routine corporate resolution. I did not sit down. "Is it the resolution that removes me as president?" I asked. The room went silent. Daniel's face changed first. The warmth disappeared. What remained was the man from behind the locked door. "Claire?" he said slowly. "What are you talking about?" I looked at Marcus. "Or is it the document that transfers Bennett House to North Star Capital after the fake $1.8 million loan defaults?" Marcus stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. Daniel reached for my arm, but I stepped away. "You should sit down," he whispered. "No, Daniel, you should." The conference room door opened. Aunt Evelyn entered first. Priya followed, carrying two thick binders. Behind them came a federal investigator and 3 officers. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel looked afraid. Marcus began shouting that everything was a misunderstanding. One of his lawyers immediately told him to stop speaking. Daniel did not shout directly at me. "You set me up," he said. I almost admired the arrogance of those words. "No," I replied. "You built the trap." I simply stopped standing inside it. The investigator placed the recorded calls, bank transfers, forged documents, and trust request on the table. Marcus turned pale. Daniel kept staring at me as if he still believed our history would save him. Then the investigator revealed the final surprise. North Star Capital no longer controlled the loan. 2 days earlier, under legal supervision, my father's trust had purchased the debt from the original lender. The shell company Daniel planned to use against me had failed to meet its own disclosure requirements. That gave the lender the right to sell the note. I now controlled the debt attached to my own company. And because Marcus had secretly used his vacation home and investment office as additional security, I controlled the liens against those properties too. Marcus turned toward Daniel. "You said her trust was untouchable." Daniel finally lost his calm. He accused Marcus of moving too much money. Marcus accused Daniel of forging the trust documents. Within seconds, the 2 men who had planned everything together began confessing by blaming each other. The officers arrested them in my conference room. As Daniel was led past me, he stopped. "Claire, please," he said. "We can fix this. I made mistakes, but I loved you." I looked at the man who attended my mother's funeral, remembered every birthday, and built a marriage around my trust. "You did not love me," I said. "You studied me." His face crumpled, but I felt no victory in that moment. Only grief for the woman I had been when I believed him. The criminal case lasted 11 months. Marcus accepted a plea agreement and testified against Daniel. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided emails proving that Daniel had first discussed gaining access to my family trust 7 years earlier, 2 years before our wedding. That was the hardest truth to learn. Daniel's proposal, the rushed financial changes, and many of the choices I had called loving had been parts of a long plan. Yet the emails also showed moments of hesitation. At one point, Daniel told Marcus he wanted to abandon the scheme because he had developed real feelings for me. Marcus reminded him how much money was at stake. Daniel chose the money. That knowledge gave me a strange kind of peace. He may have loved me in some broken way, but love without loyalty is only another lie. Daniel was convicted of fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and money laundering. Marcus lost his firm and both properties he had used as collateral. The money recovered from their accounts repaid the fraudulent loan and covered the damage to my company. I divorced Daniel before his sentencing. I could have sold Marcus's vacation home, but I chose something more meaningful. It stood on several quiet acres near the coast, so I converted it into a retreat center for women, rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. We named it Second Compass House. The original compass necklace was sold at auction. I used the money to establish the center's first emergency fund. Bennett House survived. In fact, it grew. Priya became our chief financial officer, and Aunt Evelyn joined our board, although she still claims she is retired. I also changed the way I think about trust. For a long time, I blamed myself for signing the documents. I believed intelligence should have protected me. But betrayal does not happen because the victim is foolish. It happens because someone close enough to know your heart decides to exploit it. Trust was not my weakness. Daniel's decision to abuse it was his. On what would have been our 6th anniversary, I visited Second Compass House. A woman named Rebecca had just arrived with 2 suitcases and her teenage daughter. She looked exhausted and terrified. She told me she had spent 15 years believing she could not survive without her husband. I gave her a key to her room and said, "You already survived the hardest part. You saw the truth." As I walked outside, the evening sky turned gold over the water. For the first time, the anniversary did not feel like a funeral. It felt like proof that an ending could become an entrance. Daniel had believed I was easy to trap because I loved deeply and trusted completely. He was wrong. He taught me that the most dangerous trap is not the one someone builds around you. It is the lie that you must remain the person they expected you to be. I walked into his trap as a trusting wife, but I walked out as the woman who owned the ground beneath it. He thought my trust made me easy to destroy, but when the trap finally closed, he was the one standing inside it,